Thank you very much. I want to give a quick shout out to the staff, to everybody who's involved in this conference. This is an incredibly cool conference. It's really one that's been close and near and dear to my heart and the hearts of my staff for many years. And as somebody who's generally actually on the live stream, much love to everybody involved in keeping the live stream up, and much love to everybody who's out there on the live stream listening to it. It's great that we can all around the world participate in this super cool event, because all of you here are like the cool kids. So, I'm normally at home, like, pining. So I'm super glad to be able to come here and share a little bit. I want to give like a really practical talk and give everybody some useful things that they can sort of walk away with. I'm Ben Rockwood. I'm the VP of Engineering and Operations over at Mondu. Mondu is a super cool company that's in the we're in the policy as code and security space. So for many years, I started out at Sun, the Silicon Valley, and then I went to Joint, first infrastructure as a service cloud, and then over to Chef and whatnot. And throughout my entire journey in the industry, one thing that's really bugged me is that we spend a lot of time setting up these complex infrastructures. We invest huge amounts of time in getting it just, every little nuance just right. And then we walk away. We walk away. And over the years, we came up with better and better tools for actually configuring and setting up and deploying our infrastructures. But once it's deployed out there, that's it. Like, we just sort of assume it's fine. And we know that that's inherently insufficient. Because when we actually get woken up in the middle of the night, the first thing that pops into your head is, what changed? What changed? And a journey to try and figure out what is that thing that changed. And particularly when I take on security and compliance, I do compliance at a lot of the companies I've been with, and I always feel a little dirty when I sit there and tell my auditor that everything is configured the way that it's supposed to be. And then in the back of my head, my inner ops mantra is sitting there kind of going like, but is that what it's going to be in 5 minutes? Maybe not. What we're doing over at Mondu is we have 2 tools that we've open sourced, CNQuery and CNSpec. This was born by Dom and Chris, who did InSpec, which some of you may know. It just sort of takes us to the next level. So we have the ability to query all of our infrastructure, cloud, SaaS, you name it. We can query what's out there, and then we can write assertions about what the state of that infrastructure is, which means I can now actually monitor change within my infrastructure. This is really important, especially for those times when you've spent a huge amount of time getting one little detail right. Like, you ever submitted a PR that was like a 1-line PR that you spent 6 hours getting to? Like, we've all done that, right? And you're just hoping nobody notices how long it took you to realize that you just needed to flip one bit in a config file. But then the other part of you is like, dear Lord, that better never change, otherwise I'm screwed. Because you're gonna have to go back through that learning journey, right? So anyway, we're doing some really cool stuff in the security vulnerability space. So we're a small staff, and we work really fast. And as a result, we need to sort of think on our feet. We're also a small company, and I'm super cheap. I don't like spending a huge amount of money on my tools, and so I want to share some of the patterns that I came up with, and this is one that I thought was kind of totally obvious, but maybe not. And in particular, it's because it's a couple of very simple primitives here that we're going to talk about, GitHub Actions and Playwright, but you need to think about them in a certain sort of way. Given this beautiful set, I mean, this is one of the things I love about this conference is that we get this beautiful set. I thought I need a quote from A Midsummer's Night Dream, and man, this one just nails it, right? This feels like my life. Take pains, be perfect. I mean, particularly in observability, I don't know about you guys, but that's what I feel like my mission in life is to work hard, take pains, with the intention of being perfect. Perfect for the company, perfect for our developers, perfect for our customers, and we don't always get there, but most of the time we get pretty close. I also think it's a little bit ironic that it comes from the bottom. So this is a quote from bottom. Anyway. A a little story about how I got to this pattern with GitHub Actions in Playwright. Because shit happens. But more often, we don't actually say that shit happens. 3 a.m. we say, shit, that just happened. So here's a couple of things that happened that sort of led to this pattern. The first was in November when I looked at my GCP bill, because I also do all the financial stuff for operations. And I noticed that there was this like line item that I hadn't seen before, and it was for uptime monitoring. I never noticed that before. Like, why is that number like really large? Turns out that GCP, so we do most everything we do on GCP. In GCP, they had really nice uptime monitoring. You can go and create a probe, and you could, just like almost any, Pingdom or any of the other solutions out there, right? You can specify a URL, any parameters that you want to. You can choose what region you go into and how often you do it. And here's the neat thing is they didn't charge for it. So it's like, yes, please. I will monitor 50 different URLs every 5 minutes from, yes, let's do all the regions in the world. Why not? Zero cost. It's fantastic. Apparently, somebody at Google decided this maybe isn't like the smartest idea, and they should actually like charge when you do more than some number that I don't recall. So all of a sudden, I start getting charged for this, and I had to suddenly realize just how spoiled I was that I was getting all these for free. So I had to deal with that. So I started looking around. Okay, if I'm going to pay for this thing, do I want to continue to use GCP, or do I want to go look at something else? So I go and look at all the players. Pingdom was first of mine, used that lots of other places. But then after that whole SolarWinds thing, it just feels a little unsavory to do anything with those guys. I mean, it happens, but still, like, it didn't feel quite right. There's a lot of other great solutions out there, but I started to really notice, like, it's just expensive, just no matter what you do. And the combinatorial math, like, kind of, like, gets really high, right? It's when you first look at that, like, number and you're like, hey, I'm doing, like, 1.2 million checks per month, and you're like, that seems like a lot. Then you start breaking it down, regions, URLs, and okay, yeah, no, actually I do, right? And if I'm monitoring every 5-10 minutes, yeah, that adds up real quick. So of the available solutions out there, it was really now, okay, if I'm going to pay for it, I better get my money for it. And was not really blown away with a lot of the choices that I had out there. It all felt a little too basic. So not long after this, I ran into what we'll call the Firebase incident. So, like a lot of you, I got all these great dashboards. I got all this great telemetry coming out of my system. I know the latencies. I know all I'm looking at everything, right? And I've got a couple extra monitors because, I want to actually live in a NOC, but I don't. So I've got a couple extra monitors in my office. So I'm looking at everything going on, and boy, the site's just humming along. Everything's going great. And I get a report that users can't log in. Turned out, we use Firebase for auth, and there was an incident that was going on in Google with Firebase. Now, it didn't last very long. But here I am looking at this dashboard that tells me everything is fine, right? I'm looking at all my data, everything's great, except users can't log into the friggin' system. Ouch. Not perfect, right? Not perfect. So we need to go a little bit further than just, are the URLs responding and looking at latency and all these sort of normal things we're looking at out of the system. Because if new users can't log back in, that's a problem. So I need to do some comprehensive testing. And what happens when you do testing a lot? Testing just turns into monitoring, right? So a little bit about the architecture that I was dealing with here. So at Mondu, we have 2 open source client scanners, cnquery and cnspec. So you have 2 binaries. Data is transmitted from those when you do a scan up to GraphQL API. We have one in the US, one in the EU. We've got a simple UI, SPA app that sits on the front end that interacts with the GraphQL API. And our iteration of release is very high. So we do at least 1 release every week. Usually it's 4, 5, or 6. We release very, very quick, the front end and the back end and the client. So it's a lot of release and a lot of moving parts. And at the rate that we're moving, it's very possible that problems can come up. So what do I want to test? What I'd like to do to test here is I want to spin up 2 Docker containers, 1 per region. one for each region. I want to install the latest CNSpec client. It's dependent upon the code base for CN query, so I kind of get that for free. I want to execute a scan. I want to validate that there was a successful execution of it. So cool, client's working, and I can download it and grab it. Now I want to log into the web console for each region. I want to navigate to the results, verify positive results, and then delete the assets that I just created in the system and then log out. So I want to be able to see the whole process from sort of end to end that anybody would go through as they were using the product. And so if I can do that, what I've verified is that the installation procedures are working, the client is available on the release site, because right, you've got to host all that stuff, and that's one of my concerns. That scans are completing successfully, so all the profiles are working, that the API is accepting results, so the server and the database are good on the back end. The client is being served, so we can log into it. Authentication services are functioning. Console elements are functioning properly because I'm navigating around the site, and both regions are healthy and performant. So this gives me a really nice sort of end-to-end sort of testing of our entire environment. And this is sort of what I need to complement all the other sort of observability that I've got going on. So what I decided to implement was a pattern based on GitHub Actions and Playwright. And naming is super important. Now, a lot of people think that naming is hard. I don't think it's hard, but it's just like, you just need to get it right, right? And I was trying to think of like a good, clever name for this, and I was thinking like, well, it's kind of working out, sort of exercising, kind of need like that like 80s Jane Fonda sort of like thing. And then like, it occurred to me like Richard Simmons, like, yeah, Richard Simmons is good. And then I found this picture. Not today, Satan, not today. I was like, that's exactly it. That's the feeling that I've got. So we're gonna go with that. So it became Simmons. We exercise the site every 30 minutes. We send results out of Simmons via notifications to Discord, because like I said, we're cheap, so we don't use Slack. We're with the cool kids who use Discord. And the great thing about this is the cost is zero. Nada. So let's talk about the two elements that make this up. Everyone's, I'm sure, heard of GitHub Actions, but there are a number of people who actually think of GitHub Actions as like a CI/CD pipeline. You're not wrong, but it sort of misses a couple of interesting properties of GitHub Actions. In GitHub repositories, we can create actions, right? Those are workflows that are consisting of jobs and steps. And you can create as many of these as you like. So as opposed to a lot of the CI/CD solutions where you have like sort of like one master sort of config, and everything is sort of tied off of one master config based on different sort of branches of your pipeline or whatnot. These are completely decoupled. There is no implicit relationship between them. So I can do any number of things that I want to do, and they have no dependency upon each other. They can execute in response to events. So, your normal ones, push, pull request, merge, right? Those are all pretty standard. You can call them manually via workflow call. You can remotely invoke them via repository dispatch. That's one thing that we've actually used in our release pipeline. Somehow I ended up becoming release engineering as well. I actually broke all the different sort of builders for all of our different client versions into different repositories, and then have one master repository that calls each of them to invoke the function. So I essentially have this like microservices-oriented like release pipeline, which is super cool, except the developers are just like, I showed them a graph of how it works, and they were just like, no. But it's fun. You can call via webhooks, you can watch, and you can use almost any manipulation of a repository to actually trigger an event. But also, super interestingly, you can use a scheduled event, which can take a cron, which means I can do anything I want on a schedule. Now, I'm old school, and I kind of pine for the days when we had the admin server, right? You had that like one server in the corner, then you could just like put arbitrary cron jobs in it to just go and do sort of different functions. And I know, you're not supposed to do that because then it's a single point of failure, and then anything happens, and then it turns out you put way too much on it, and then everyone's like, don't touch that machine, right? Because like the post-it note on it, this is like, don't touch. I know, but it was kind of cool. Now I have this, right? I can actually do a lot of these sort of administrative tasks using actions, which I really like. These workflows can be run on hosted or private runners. They're built by the minute. You've got Windows, Mac, and Linux runners available. They're inherently source controlled, right? So you kind of get that for free because it's in a Git repository. But here's the interesting sort of thing. If you are in a public repository, hosted runner minutes are free. Also, if you use private runners, you don't have to pay for those minutes. Now, this is super interesting because it's actually a really cool thing on GitHub, Microsoft's part. They're kind of really encouraging you to get out there and make your stuff public, right? So it poses a really interesting question. If I'm going to run this thing in GitHub Actions, it's going to consume a lot of minutes. Do I need to pay for those? Well, if I make it public, I don't have to pay for those minutes. And then you suddenly say, does my monitoring actually need to be private? Does it? Not really. So if I can make that public, I can now share with all of you, with the community, right? My average customer is not going to care about this stuff. People in the observability community, you guys might want to see. I would love to see how you guys are doing it, right? Why do we need to put this stuff behind closed doors? So the first thing here is the paradigm shift is Actions is an amazing automation platform, and you should think of it as an automation platform. If you've thought of it purely as a CI/CD pipeline, you're sort of losing out on a lot of interesting possibilities. And as it turns out, this is actually how Actions started life. Okay, so here's an example of an actual action, if you haven't used them. We've got a name. We've got on that describes any number of events. Here I've got 2 events that we're associating with it. One is workflow dispatch, which is like manual invocation, and then the schedule. And so I'm running at 15 and 45 of every hour, right? I've got a job. Here I have asset scan as my job. I give it a name, give it a timeout, tell it where I want it to run. In this case, Ubuntu latest means an Ubuntu hosted runner. And then I've got a number of steps. And those steps can be, like the first one here, uses. This is where we're using a reusable action that goes and checks out the repository, v3. And then any number of sort of additional steps. So here I'm using a secret to pull a configuration that's been base64 encoded. I drop that into a file on my runner. Then I go ahead and pull my Mondu client Docker container, and then actually perform a scan, right? Boom, easy. At the end of this, I can put notifications on there. So here I'm actually, like I said, we're using Discord. So I actually am using an action here that has a conditional on it, if failure. So if at any point in the workflow that we fail, we're going to invoke this. And here I'm just going to go ahead and send a message. Again, I've got a secret here, which is a webhook. And that's going to go ahead and send a message off that says, oops, scan failed, right? Okay. So with that action, I have the ability to sort of do the first part of the testing that I want to do, which is I want to go grab my client, test it, pull it down, do the scan, send data in. Okay, great. Now I know that all that is working. Now I want to go and actually look at all the results to sort of verify that everything sort of got to where it's supposed to be. And for that, I'm using Playwright. Playwright is a really amazing open source end-to-end web app testing framework from Microsoft. They did a really brilliant job with this. And as an ex-Sun guy, I feel kind of weird, kind of loving on Microsoft so much. Like, it doesn't come natural. It really doesn't. But I got to say, these guys are doing great stuff. Like, just mad props to Microsoft and the way that they've gone from the evil empire to, you know, the benevolent friends to all of us. They've done some great work. Playwright is very similar to Selenium, if anyone's played with Selenium. Selenium's been around for a very long time, very cool tool. It's evolved a lot over the years. But Playwright had the advantage of sort of coming on the tails of it and sort of learning all the lessons, right? All these things that Selenium sort of did sort of poorly. Playwright was able to take advantage of that experience and get it right. And so they really got it beautifully right. You can write tests in JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, .NET, or Java, so sort of no excuse for it not having support for the language that you want. You can execute tests on Linux, Windows, or Mac OS. It supports Chromium, WebKit, and Firefox, so you've got the gamut of backed browsers. You can run headed or headless, and you can record video output, screenshots, and it can create reports. So you can get really detailed data out of each of these runs. And most importantly, it's got a really amazing test code generator. So the hard part of getting started with a lot of these is like, okay, how am I going to sit down and like write all these sort of test scenarios and whatnot? Playwright makes it super, super easy. So practically the way this looks is, so this is the JavaScript use case. In this case, I'm going to use yarn, create Playwright. That goes and actually creates a repository, a directory for me. Asks me a couple of different questions. It will actually even create a base GitHub action for you directly in it. Does all the sort of basic setup. Once you've got that, you can go in there and use Playwright CodeGen and give it a URL. In this case, console.mondu.com. But you give it your site. Now it pops open a browser and we can start clicking around. Once you've got that basic test, you can go and modify it to taste. So you're generally going to go and modify it with sort of expecs and whatnot. That's the test element. And then when you actually want to invoke it, Playwright test. And the test goes off and runs. Couldn't be easier. And so this is the beauty is their CodeGen. So in this case, you see on the left, I've got a browser that has popped open for me. In the top hand corner, you can see npx Playwright CodeGen in a URL. It pops open a browser, right, that I specified. I can now click around and do whatever I want to do there. And as I'm going in my right-hand window here, it's actually creating each of the steps as I go, which is awesome. You can log in, you can use SAML SSO, you can record tokens, you can do all kinds of wonderful things. And you even have up there in the top right-hand corner of the interface, you see a target test runner. If you're using Python, you can specify that you want Python. It will generate Python code for you, right? Whichever language you want to use, really easy to generate that. And now we've got our tests. So now we just have to create a new job in GitHub Actions that's going to install Playwright. Then it's going to go invoke the tests on it. And at the end of the run, I actually add this step here. So this is a reusable action that uploads artifacts to GitHub. Again, we use a conditional if failure. So if we fail anywhere inside that job, it's going to go ahead and invoke this. And we can go and pull its results. So we can actually create that screen recordings, create those screenshots and a full report. It'll be dropped into that results directory. And now I go ahead and upload that on failure, and we retain it for 14 days. This is one of the things you do want to be careful about, the amount of storage that you're consuming on the service with these. 14 days is long enough for me to sort of be able to go back and correlate. And if it fails, then I end up getting this Playwright report here at the bottom of my failed action run. So I can go and investigate exactly what happened. I can go replay the video and see exactly where in the flow things broke down. So you can check this out for yourself. Like I said, it's open. I think it's probably gone a little too far to say it's open source. It's like not that much source. But it's open. You can go look at it. GitHub.com/MondoHQ-Simmons. You can see all the runs there. You can see the runs that fail. One of the things I would advise as you do this is you will suddenly notice that like IDs and different sort of hooks within your UI, you really want to make sure those are stable because you're using those to actually direct Playwright through each of the sort of steps. So it's always funny when I see like an instant double failure. The first question is like the developers move something. So we've actually made some changes in the way that the UI team works, so that they're updating the Playwright tests as they go. So they're using Playwright on their own in UI for tests prior to release. But then I actually have them make sure that they sort of keep stable hooks so that it doesn't break our tests. I want to throw out, if you've played with Playwright or you've ever looked at Playwright before, you can't help but run into these guys, Checkly. Checkly is a super cool company. They're doing some great stuff. I kind of bagged on the solutions that are out there, but Checkly is great. Pricing is reasonable, but they're also doing really great things for the Playwright community. And so I really want to sort of call out to them, a big shout out to them, because they're doing really, really great stuff. If you don't want to sort of do it this way and you want a hosted service, definitely go check out Checkly. The only thing you're going to lose there is that flexibility of sort of that front part of, I want to do any arbitrary thing I want to do, and then I'm going to go run Playwright. In that case, it's hosted on them. So, very, very cool solution. Perfect. Don't go. So, hopefully this helps you out. So anybody who's not doing end-to-end testing, you have no excuse now. Like, you can go build it this afternoon, super easy. Everyone can be on the same page. I hope this helps you out. I hope it challenges what you think maybe about GitHub Actions, and can build some interesting, cool things. So thank you very much.
Wow, that was perfect timing. I just want to say, like, inspirationally, Ben is like, this is hair goals, right? Mine's very straight. And I'm like, look at that volume. It's truly amazing. Yeah. Well, I just gotta have dreams, right?
Yeah.
Any questions for Ben from the audience here?
Or topics you want me to rant about. Apparently there was not, I heard yesterday there were not enough hot takes. So I'm perfectly happy to go and just start dishing on things. This is another fun tradition from Sun Microsystems is, we're good at dishing on stuff.
Yeah. Oh, we have one. Here you go.
You're saying you ended up on the 30-minute eval rate, knowing it was free. Is that kind of limit?
No, I could run it every 5 minutes if I wanted to. 30 minutes just sort of felt right for our use case. I could run it much more aggressively if I wanted to. I think a total run from beginning to end is just under 3 minutes. Actually, if you look back at the slide, it's about like 3 minutes, I think, to actually run the full thing. So yeah, 30 minutes just felt right. Yeah.
At some point they will start dropping.
Sorry?
At some point GitHub Actions will start dropping. You run to frequently automated.
It will stop talking?
Oh, like it'll time out after. Is that what you're saying? It'll time out eventually.
Yeah, I have not hit a point at which I've gotten throttled by GitHub. Yeah, I mean, when I have experienced this plenty of times where if I get too aggressive with the GitHub API, I get throttled out, rate limited on the API. That happens constantly and it's annoying. Like, dear Lord, will they please, raise that limit? I don't know how busy their back end is, but it's ridiculously low. But I have not actually ever gotten throttled with regards to executions of pipelines.
Another problem, sometimes it breaks. You have to wait.
It's been remarkably stable for me.
Oh.
Yeah, here.
Do you have a sense of cost? Like if you were to run this using GitHub's infrastructure, are you running it on private runners?
No, I'm running it on GitHub's infrastructure, but because it's public, the cost is zero. That's the key. Because it's public, there's no cost. Like I said, this is I think a really nice thing that Microsoft and GitHub are doing is that they are encouraging people to sort of keep things open. And so we as a company have been, wherever possible, we're opening things up, right? There's all kinds of things in our release pipeline or whatnot that I'm like, do I really need to hide the way that I'm building a Mac package? No, not really. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that when I was trying to figure out the right way to build a Mac package, there were very few good examples out there. So I'm like, at least I can sort of contribute something back too. So it's sort of a win-win. But the thing is, admittedly, to the point that was made yesterday, things are changing in this economy with interest rates on the rise and whatnot, and there's a lot of scrutiny on startups to make money, right? It's not just about doing whatever it takes in order to gain customers. And so, yeah, it's very possible that, next week, GitHub comes out and says, oh, that's the end, no more. You got to pay for minutes, whether it's public or private. In which case, sort of the party's over. But for now, help yourself.
What it would cost you if you had to pay for it?
Yeah, I don't want to pull the number out of my head right now because I know it will be wrong. But yeah, you can go and you can look at the cost. I do regular pivot charts. This is one of the things I look at every month is in our GitHub builds. I'm looking at all the minutes accumulated and doing the cost factor and whatnot. And I mean I think it's reasonable. It's reasonable, but I'll also tell you that if you want to go the private runner route, dear Lord, please please, don't go get a VM. Ugh. Like, doing this on a VM, VMs are ridiculously expensive, right? I mean, it's a conspiracy to make us run everything on containers, because holy shit, are VMs fucking expensive. That's how cheap I am. It's like, I think the VMs are incredibly expensive. Like, $80 a month? No! You can go to Herzl or some of the other server providers, and like at auction, you can get a really beefy, physical piece of hardware for like $40 a month, right? So, I mean, that's all of our private runners are Herzl robots. They're server auction machines with like, 128 gigs of RAM and, a couple terabyte of NVMe, and they cost like $40 a month.
I think there was another question over on the side. Yeah.
I think you alluded to like the 3-minute test. It takes 3 minutes to do a test. Do you have any advice for heavy JavaScript sites with lots of third-party integrations where when you get one false alarm on a 3-minute test, if it fails for some oddball reason, you start ignoring failures. You don't see alarms for a very long time. Do you have any, can you speak to that?
Alert fatigue is real. Yeah, for sure. I felt a little stimulated. One of the talks we had yesterday where we were talking about alert fatigue was there's that sense of like, well, I just want to know what's going on, so I don't mind the alert failing all the time. I've fallen into that like a lot. I'm one of those people. So there's two ways you go about that. One is just that if there is this intermittent behavior, you should definitely be aware of it, right? The others is it gives you the opportunity to sit down and take the time and figure out like where are those things happening, right? And that's where the discipline comes in. Is if we're timing out all the time, look, we need to slow down as an engineering organization. We need to figure out why, because it shouldn't be happening. It's intermittent behavior, like what's going on there, and that can be the really hard thing. And this is, I mean, the bane of our life, right? Of observability is just that you learn things. And then you go back to, the stakeholders and you're like, great, now I've learned this thing, we should do something. And they're like, not in the roadmap, right? And you're like, I know, but we should do it, right? And then you end up getting these weird places where they're like, could you just not monitor that so that we don't have to like think about that problem? Because nobody was complaining before you showed us this data, right? Oops.
So maybe to ask different, you test every 30 minutes. The first time it fails, do you skip it? Or are you actually looking at that each time it fails?
I am not looking at it every time it fails. And there are intermittent failures that happen. Admittedly, if you go and look, you'll see that there are intermittent random failures that occur. I make a point, like usually once a week, I'll sit down and like go back through all those reports because I'm holding them for 14 days. And I'll look at them, right? And yeah, I get like a sense that there are some that fail, and like I don't worry about all that much. If I get a double failure though, because I'm doing 2 regions, right? So if I see a failure in the US and the EU simultaneous, then I know something's not right. That's not transient.
So it's something to tell you when both fail, or is it more you're reactive?
Each of them will message out. So actually, this is why you'll notice in the. I didn't include that. But when I send the message into Discord with the failure, the region that failed is a variable, right? So I can see individual failures there, and they're definitely just like any sort of monitoring system. You kind of like get a sense for it over time, particularly if you see like 2 failures in a row, something's very wrong.
I think there might have been a question over on this side. Didn't want to miss it. Anything? All right, last call. Any other questions? Yeah, one right here.
When you run a Playwright and data test, and like, I think you mentioned in your video archives, are those also saved? Like someone you get a console
Yeah, they're uploaded and they're saved with the action. Yeah, it's part of the action. In fact, so if you go and you look at my repository, you can go look through all the actions, and any of them that have failure, click on that, and at the bottom of the page, the results page, you'll actually see the output. So the output, you can actually configure Playwright to actually give like GitHub Action, nice error messages, so it actually gets picked up as annotations on it, so you can see it pretty quick. But then when you see the artifact down at the bottom, so any of you guys like go and like download like the video recordings and the reports and see exactly where it went. If you find anything, please let me know. I won't like pay you consulting hours, but like I'll definitely be grateful. You'd be like, Or salty. I mean, the thing is when we give each other advice, it normally starts off with, hey, dumbass. Hey, did you notice, you idiot?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another big round of applause for Ben.